On June 7th, voters will elect a new government. I don't know who voters will choose. That is up to them. But I'm pretty sure that it won't be me. After Thursday, I will no longer be Ontario's premier. And I am okay with that.
With less than a week to go before Election Day, Ontario Liberal leader Kathleen Wynne has waved the white flag. On Saturday, she conceded defeat to either the PCs or the NDP. But she's still asking her supporters to vote Liberal to stop those parties from getting a majority. It was a surprise move, but not unheard of. Back in 2001, BC's NDP Premier Ujjal Dosanjh also conceded before the election.
I know I'm going into the opposition. I want to have a contingent of New Democrats to hold Mr. Campbell's feet to the fire. Vancouver.
Facing a 50 percentage point deficit in the polls, Dosanjh admitted he was going to lose to the Liberals and Gordon Campbell. The voters elected just 2 NDP MLAs to the legislature, and that didn't include Dosanjh. So, did that admission of defeat backfire, or would he do it all over again? Former BC Premier Ujjal Dosanjh joins me now from Vancouver. Hi there, Mr. Dosanjh. Great to see you again.
Hi.
Okay, so taking us back to your own decision to concede defeat in 2001, a week before you led the BC NDP to its worst ever election result. What do you remember from back then?
Well, I remember that when I took over as premier about just over a year before the election, we were at 11% in the polls. And then in the campaign, we weren't doing too well. We had the debate. There was only one debate, and we were beginning to pick up. And then a minor scandal erupted of a letter that had been written unauthorized by a cabinet minister promising millions of dollars of money to a lumber company. And our numbers, which were beginning to go up a little bit, just tanked. And our internal polling a week before the election was saying that we were going to get 0 seats. And our situation was slightly different. In BC, there were only 2 political parties that had MLAs in the legislature and had any prospect of electing MLAs. Therefore, I wanted to make sure there were at least somebody, 1, 2, 3, 6, 7 MLAs to keep the government's feet to the fire. And of course, we elected 2, and I wasn't one of them. I was happy with that. I was okay with that. But at least we had 2. Where we were actually going forward, looking at 0 about a week before the election.
I imagine conceding defeat before the election was as novel then as it is now. How difficult a decision was it to make?
It was a very difficult decision. Of course, I mean, people would say all kinds of things, you know, how can you give up? How can you be a defeatist? But you're also looking at the possibility of 0 seats and a total demolition of your political party, which I didn't want to see. And I wanted to make sure that there is someone in the legislature to hold the flag up for the NDP. And you know, it wasn't an easy decision. I'm sure it wasn't an easy decision for Kathleen Wynne. Her situation is slightly different. There are 3 political parties in contention. Any one of them could have formed government at the end of the election. But I understand that she faced a similar situation where some polls indicated that they could have less than 8 seats, 2 or 3 seats in the legislature, which would mean the loss of official status, party status in the legislature. And obviously, she made a very difficult decision for herself.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you what you were sort of thinking when you saw that announcement made on Saturday.
Well, I was in Ontario the last week of May, May 21st to May 24th, 5th, and I saw how the numbers were in one of the committee rooms, and things weren't going well. And obviously, she had, and I heard her say that she thought she did well in the debate, and the numbers should have moved up. Didn't move up, and therefore I think she saw the writing on the wall and didn't want the party totally decimated. And I think she's making a reasonable argument. Obviously, anybody that wants to have a majority government would dismiss that argument out of hand, but she is making an argument that if you don't like either the NDP or the PCs, one of them is going to be government. elect some Liberals and they can hold their feet to the fire.
Is it risky, though, to try and encourage that this way? Is it possible that it could backfire, that instead of people saying, oh, now I better support my local candidate, instead they'll say, what's the point?
Well, I think that if the loyal Liberals who had been loyal to the party, 10, 15, 20%, if they realize that if they bolted now from the party would be decimated totally, and that one of the others would be a government anyway, and there could be a minority government or a majority government, I think that her decision would likely solidify the Liberal support rather than it kind of fleeing to other parties.
Interesting. What advice do you have for the party after? I mean, your party, if in fact this election does turn out the way those numbers say, and they might not even have official party status, what was your party's sort of rebuilding process like, and what did you learn from that might make its way into advice for the Liberals?
Well, you go back to ground zero. Actually, you start rebuilding. It's going to take a long time. It's a long haul. It takes several years, and first thing they'll have to do is get into a leadership campaign and elect a new leader, and that hopefully would mean a renewal for them, and they'd be in contention again.
I hope you don't mind, but I wanted to switch topics before I let you go. And we had you on last time talking about the pipeline. And since then, the federal government did announce that it is going to outright buy it. The Prime Minister is in BC tomorrow, and I'm wondering what you think, how his message will be received there after this decision.
Well, I think that the lines have been drawn clearly. Obviously, I understand the polls are saying that nationally, more than half the people now oppose the decision to purchase. I think the Prime Minister would have been better placed if he had acted sooner and actually had taken over the pipeline legally rather than financially. But be that as it may, I think he took the decision to ensure that he's not perceived to be using a hammer, because the legal approach, passing legislation and simply taking over legally, would have been seen as a very big hammer, and people perhaps would have been angrier. I think that he's going to face, he'll face demonstrations and he'll face criticism. And I'm sure he knew that going in. He had to make a decision. He had no option not to purchase it if he hadn't brought the legislation in to take over. So, it's going to be a difficult summer in British Columbia, and I just ran into one of the activists in the lobby here, and I understand that tempers are running high. But Mr. Trudeau, I'm sure, knows that that was going to be the case.
Elizabeth May said, I think last week at one point, that the Liberals will lose every seat in BC, that there won't be one left standing. Do you think that that's accurate, or does it go too far based on your experience there?
Well, in our worst days, we had, federal Liberals had 2 seats here. And in our best days before Mr. Trudeau, we had 10. My sense is that, election is more than a year from now. People have short memories, and, they'd be able to pick up 5 to 10 seats. They won't have the 18 they have now.
Interesting. Okay, thanks a lot for your insight, Mr. Dosanjh.
Thank you.